The first step is to create a new repository from a template. We navigate to the template repository on GitHub. And click on Use this template. Before we do so, let's take a quick look at what we are going to get right out of the box. We will get a website with a diagram, left navigation panel, and instructions what to do next, including examples of Markdown documentation. Now, let's go back and create a new repository. Once we create a repository, our first website deployment is going to fail because we haven't set up GitHub pages yet. Let's do it. Now we will go back to the Actions tab and manually trigger a new deployment. The deployment was successful, and we can take a look at our website. Here we go. The next step for us is to customize page template and root action files to our needs. We will start with the page template. First, we will change the theme. There are many boot swatch themes to choose from. Let's use the sandstone. In your projects, you would need to either delete the head or change to your Google Analytics. For the sake of demonstration, we'll change fluid to false. Once we commit the changes, a new deployment shall start automatically. Yep, here it is. Success. And now we can take a look at the result. It is all the same because the browser has cached the site. Let's do a force refresh. Control F5. Voila! The next step is to change the header and the footer. To do so, we will need to edit the root action YAML file. First of all, we'll change the icon. There's more than 1 million icons on Icons 8. I have a subscription with them. Icons can be used for free, subject to compliance with their terms and conditions. Let's search for construction. This one looks nice. Let's use it. Now we change the header text. And update the footer link. Commit changes. Wait for the deployment to complete. Lo and behold. Now we will edit the diagram in the online diagram editor, save the changes, and it will trigger a new deployment. First of all, we'll rename the page. Now we will add a diagram node for Bob. We will use an icon from Icons 8 once again. Let's create a connection from Alice to Bob. Change the ID to something meaningful. And add documentation property. We will also add a tooltip. For Bob, we will add a reference to a documentation file. Add a tooltip. And save. Saving the diagram has triggered a new deployment. Our deployment is successful, and now we can take a look at the result. The diagram got updated, and we have a Bob item in the left navigation panel. If we click on the connection, it will navigate it to the page with documentation which we entered on the diagram. When we go to the Bob's page, there is an error message because we've specified a reference to a file which does not exit. We will create the missing file in a moment. Please note that there is an icon next to Bob's name in the navigation panel and at the top of the contents pane. This icon was auto-generated by scaling the diagram image. Also note that the URL of Bob's page was derived from the diagram element ID. Now, let's create the missing file. Once again, code modifications have triggered a new deployment. The error message is gone, and we can see our documentation. Now we will create a diagram page with additional details about Bob and link it to the Bob's diagram element. First, we will add Bob. Then Wendy. Note that in Icons 8 you can edit images. Let's adjust Wendy's icon a bit. Now we will add Pilchard. There isn't much to say about Pilchard, so we will add a tooltip, but no documentation. And finally, We will add Alice to this diagram as well, and link the Alice node on this diagram to the Alice node on the home diagram. We shall first link the element to the home page. And then modify the link property value to point to the Alice node. You can find details about the link format in the online documentation. As the last touch, let's update Alice's documentation on the home page. Now we commit our changes. It will trigger a new deployment. And now we have a diagram on Bob's page, and Wendy's item under Bob in the left navigation panel. Diagram elements are linked to respective pages. Pilchard is not documented and therefore there is no page for her, just a tooltip. With this approach, you can create a hierarchy of diagrams. A diagram may define new hierarchy elements and reference already defined elements. As the last step, let's modify the README file. Another deployment. And here we go.